Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video, doing JMA Friday today, having a look at the weather for the coming month from the Japanese model. Also have a look at the CFS V2 as well, and we'll have a look at a couple of charts that extend out into November, October and November as well. So it's all getting very interesting. This update will take us through towards the end of the autumn, certainly, and not far away from the end of the year, to be honest. But before we get on with that, just very quickly to say about the ads, links to articles on all the pages at Gazos.com. You can have a browse through the widgets and click through the links. You'll be helping to pay for the website, and thanks very much for doing that. So we'll just start off with the 500 millibar height anomalies from the JMA, the Japanese Meteorological Agency. These are broke down into weekly periods, of course. So the first week period takes us from the 18th to the 25th of September, the week that we're currently in. And blue is extrapolating to low pressure, orange, yellow, red extrapolating to high pressure. So what we see for the coming week is that it's quite unsettled, actually, with a trough of low pressure around and west of the UK. We've got this ridge going up to the northeast around Scandinavia, and the jet stream is going a bit like that. So it's an unsettled week being signalled here. This ridge up to the northeast could influence the weather at times, but overall probably quite a changeable week coming up once again. I don't think it's going to be quite as it has been this week, but even so, next week could be rather on the changeable side. Now, we do see signs of a change as we get through to the end of the month. This is the chart for the week of the 25th of September to the 2nd of October. The trough is sort of being pushed out into the Atlantic, into the central part of the Atlantic, just there. And this ridge to the northeast is becoming more influential. Now, the only caveat I'll put in with this is that as we've been doing these every week for the past well, I've been doing them for a long time, but as we've been looking at these every week for the past few weeks, they've generally been having this idea that the high pressure up to the northeast is going to take over the pattern, and it hasn't ever really come off. It's been a fairly changeable September, although it did settle down a little bit through the first week. So I think I have a bit of a question mark about how much influence this ridge has, but on face value, it does turn drier at the end of September and into the start of October, with that high pressure shifting the winds in from the east and possibly the southeast as well. These troughs could undercut the ridge a little bit though, so maybe the south a little bit more risk of unsettled conditions compared to the north, but generally it does show the high pressure ridging in for the end of September. That could produce some very chilly nights, by the way. And then we go through to the final two weekly period. This takes us from the 2nd of October through to the 16th, so going into the second half of next month. What we see is that the ridge is being pushed back again. So we do have the ridge still there over Scandinavia. It's being pushed back again. This is probably a transitional period, so hints of troughs in the Atlantic and to the south of us, just there and just there. I think what's happening is that generally this ridge is being pushed back a little bit to the east and the northeast, and the Atlantic is sort of striking back a little bit, so it's probably turning more unsettled through to the middle part of October. Quite how that happens, whether it happens gradually or whether it's a sudden change, I'm not sure, but I would suggest that the idea here is as we go through October, that ridge over Scandinavia probably loses its influence quite a lot, and the Atlantic begins to move back in, turning it much more unsettled. October is a very unsettled month most of the time. So have a look at the CFS V2, see how that compares to the JMA. Again, these are broken down to week periods, so the first week period takes us from the 17th of September through to the 23rd, so once again, the week that we're currently in. Again, it's the idea that we're going to have an unsettled week through the coming week. There's a trough of low pressure around the UK, indicated by those green colours, green extrapolating to low pressure, again, red, those sort of colours extrapolating to high pressure. The ridge is there up to the north, a little bit of northern blocking actually, it's a long way north, that, and also into Eastern Europe, so the heat wave that they've been having in the east of Europe goes on probably through next week, but we're pretty cool under this trough of low pressure within the 500 millibar flow, and it will also be quite unsettled as well. Signs of a change as we go through to the 24th to the 30th of September, so through to the end of the month. The trough is sort of being pushed off to the north a bit. We've got ridging taking place down to the southwest. It's a bit different to the JMA though, because that actually wants to build the ridge in from the northeast, and what we see here is that the ridge to the northeast is probably actually pushed back a little bit. So it's all still very Atlantic based. It's just that this high pressure from the Atlantic is ridging in from the west, as opposed to the high pressure to the northeast ridging in. But we keep the flow off the Atlantic, but it turns a bit more settled with that ridge down to the southwest. Probably quite cool still, though. You can see from the line that I've drawn there that the jet stream is probably still tracking on a northwest-southeast trajectory, so that's probably bringing in fairly cool temperatures. We'll have a look at the temperature and precipitation anomalies that go with this in a moment. Now, the first week of October, the 1st to the 7th, looks like this. The ridge setting up then to the north of Scotland. So that's coming back in line probably with the JMA. It's very settled that. There'll be a lot of dry weather through the first week of October. Could be cold nights, of course. The flow is still generally going to be coming from sort of a northerly or maybe even northeasterly direction, so it won't be particularly hot by any means. Could be cold nights. By day, probably not feeling too bad in the sunshine. If there is sunshine, it could be cloudy high, of course. If it is, then nighttime temperature will hold up all right, but it'll be cooler by day. But assuming it's a clear high, then we're going to get sort of cold nights with that, maybe fog, possibly even frost. And in the day, it'll feel not too bad in the sunny spell, but certainly not particularly warm. And then finally, the final week looks a bit odd. We go from the 8th to the 14th of October, and the ridge, it looks like it's weakening, and it's becoming centred sort of Iceland, Greenland, that sort of area, probably allowing low pressure to start to move in from the south, I would think. So sort of the ridge being squeezed out really with the Atlantic again striking back. So there is this suggestion within these two models that the middle of October probably sees the Atlantic coming back and having another go at us. So the temperature anomalies look like this. The coming week is a cooler than average week from the 18th to the 24th of September in those green colours. The next week, though, the 25th to the 1st, actually goes a little bit warmer than average. I've not seen that for quite a while, but go a little bit above average for the final week of September. The next week, though, the temperatures are dropping back again. That's as the high pressure comes centred to the north of the country, so the temperature go back towards average, maybe even a little bit below. And then we see the last weekly period goes a little bit warmer than average again. So really up and down with the temperatures here. So we finish up on quite a warm note from the 9th to the 15th of October. Not quite sure how that matches up with the height anomaly chart, because the heights are centred over Iceland, so presumably we'd be bringing in northerly winds. I'm not quite sure how that works out, how the model has seen that. But anyway, that's what it's showing, that we go warmer than average for the middle of October. The temperature anomalies look like, precipitation anomalies, I should say, look a bit like this. Drier than average through the coming week, and drier than average through week 2 as well. So quite a lot of dry weather through to the end of September. October starts average to a little bit drier than average again, so a pretty dry month of it coming up, and then we go near normal through the middle part of October. That's as the Atlantic is beginning to come back, so maybe the Atlantic comes back and it starts to drag in warmer air with it. That perhaps lifts the temperatures up a little bit, but of course by the time you go through to week 4, losing the signal quite a bit as well. Just want to show you the monthly 500 millibar height anomalies for October and November. These are from website weatherweb.net. Find a link to WeatherWeb on the links page. October looks like this, and it actually looks quite chilly as an anomaly for the month. We've got ridging here around Iceland and Greenland, with troughs to the south and the east of the country, so the flow within the 500 millibar flow will go like that. So we're within a trough probably for October, and it would progress to being quite an unsettled month actually, with showers, long spells, rain, and probably quite cool temperatures as well. And then November looks like this, long way off of course, and these do change on a day-by-day basis, but lots of ridging around Greenland, and we've got this trough going to the south of the ridge, so the jet stream is going onto a southerly track there. We're probably on the cold side of the jet. Would be very unsettled month. That's a really deep trough in the Atlantic, so there'd be copious amounts of rain. But because we're on the cold side of the jet, temperatures would be depressed, and you wouldn't even rule out a little bit of wintry stuff coming through at times, perhaps, with that, because the jet stream is tracking quite a long way south. So that's it for this morning's update. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, with the temperatures suggested to be a bit up and down really over the coming month. Probably quite a bit of dry weather as we go through to the end of September and the start of October. I think there is that idea within both of the JMA and the CFS that some sort of ridge will build and settle things down for a time. Early October, very end of September, early October, but it probably goes unsettled again as we go through to the middle part of the month. Quite what's happening with the temperatures, I'm not sure. They look a bit up and down, but overall probably nothing overly warm coming up, and then maybe a little bit colder as we get through to the second half of October and November as well. All very speculative. Long-range forecasting is highly experimental, and these models are not to be relied upon. That's the caveat I always have to throw in. So we'll see how it goes and see what happens. It's a weekend forecast tomorrow. Also be doing the CFS 6 month look ahead. So come back there, and that's all for now. Thanks for watching.